Folks, I want to introduce you to IIana Raia, who's the founder of a platform called Être. And Être is to be, if translated literally from French. But truly, this is a platform for young women to figure out a career trajectory. Is that right, Ilana?
It is. And thanks for having me.
I think what you've done yeoman's work in interviewing 180 boss women and asking them their very definition of what mentorship is. And truly, these questions were born out of these young women that are in your community.
They were. It's, the heart of Être when it is not COVID is that we take girls directly into companies to meet female leaders face to face. Let's stand you in the middle of Google so you can talk to engineers. Let's put you on the floor of the stock exchange and you can ask women how they got there. When COVID hit and we couldn't do that anymore, we started doing everything by Zoom. And I started to realize that girls from all over were joining these Zooms. They were no longer just girls based in New York or where these companies were. And they were all kind of asking the same questions. So the book came about because we started collecting all of the questions. How do you get an internship at SpaceX? How do I use TikTok to network? And then getting women at those companies to answer the questions. So the questions really were keyed directly from the girls. And then we just started reaching out to women.
Oh, I think you've touched on a loaded question, which is how to TikTok and network at the same time. I'm going to come back to that, but I want to get to these takeaways first. So you interviewed 180 women, and give us just a little bit of a parameter of the sandbox you were playing in. Like, who are the profiles of the women that you interviewed?
What I love about the book is that there are tons of icons. You go down that table of mentors at the front and you see names like Bobbi Brown and Kara Goldin and Hoda Kotb and Tyra Banks, but the industries also spanned a very deep variety. We had neurosurgeons and news anchors and architects and archaeologists and really responding to what the girls wanted. So the familiar questions, for the companies, Pixar or Dylan's Candy Bar, but really serious questions too about how do I raise my hand in a boardroom? And the bench was deep, and I love that about it.
Amazing. All right, let's get into your top 6 takeaways from your 180 interviews. And the first one is to be specific. This has got to be one of my pet peeves because I know I'll connect someone to a mentor and they'll write back, "Hey, let me know when you have some free time."
Yeah.
No. How could you be more specific?
Ask with intention. And I think that's whether you're asking someone to be your mentor in the first place, not saying something like, "Can I pick your brain?" Because, no, that's not how it's going to work. Actually asking questions with purpose, with intention. And the founders of TheSkimm, Carly and Danielle, touched on this in their answer, and they wrote their answer together, which I thought was terrific. But they said specifically, ask with intention, recognize what you don't know, what you need to find out, and then be specific, be purposeful. And I think that's good advice, whether you are meeting someone for the first time or in your 100th meeting with someone. Specificity will get you the answer that you're looking for.
And I'll layer on top of that, I often ask the women in my community to come back with 2 times that they know that they're going to be available, 2 dates and times, that degree of specificity. How you want to cultivate the relationship. Will it be on phone? Will it be on email? Will it be in person? And the cadence at which you expect to be able to meet with this mentor. And is this engagement going to go on forever, or is this something that you're going to want for the next 3 months? And that level of specificity also makes it easier for the other person to say yes.
Truly important, everything. And I think that's right. It could be a mentorship that spans decades when we're very lucky. It could be a mentor moment, which is unbelievably impactful just in itself. And there's value in both.
Amazing. Now, be fearless. Women have a hard time asking for help. I'm in front of my community all week long, and I see this as a recurring issue. They don't even know how to ask for help. So how does being fearless help you in this regard?
We got this threaded through so many answers in so many ways. Everything from the sculptor of the Fearless Girl statue, Kristen Visbal, who talked about the importance of being fearless, to astronauts like Cady Coleman, to Senate aides who were in the chamber on January 6th, Brennan Leach, talking about how fearlessness helped them do their job or find a job or, again, ask for a mentor. The idea that you might hear no, and that's okay. No might actually mean not right now. I can help you later. I'm not the right person to help you, but I know who is. So be fearless with your ask. And then once you're in the position, take some power, take some ownership, and let courage drive you. I think curiosity and courage go hand in hand sometimes. And I think you're right. We do have trouble being fearless, but it's a muscle like any other. And when it's cultivated, you will start using it all the time.
And part of what can embolden you, I think, is if you were to do a little bit of research into the person that you're asking to be your mentor. What's the last article that they wrote? What's the last interview that they did? And starting with that specificity, so it looks like you did your research.
Right. And that's exactly, it also shows that you have a deep interest in what they're talking about. I saw your TED Talk and I had a question. I found an article that you wrote and I thought this other one might be of interest. You're getting common ground. And when there's a generational divide, something like that can bridge that gap.
Amazing. Now, being over prepared, we just talked and touched on researching the other party, but what does it mean to be over prepared?
So this came from before COVID, one of our live events with Tyra Banks. And she sat down with 10 girls on International Women's Day, right before everything shut down for COVID. And she stressed the importance of being over prepared, that when she would walk into meetings, when she would get ready for any kind of a fashion show, she knew everything about what that designer wanted, how they've run their shows before. She had read everything, she had watched film. And she said it took a lot of fear out of situations. It reminded everyone of her professionalism, and it made her feel like she belonged where she was. And I know from my experience being in the corporate world, preparation is key. And if you're going to have a spotlight, you better be prepared in every way to use it.
And I've learned that from my training in television. You are maybe going to be on for 3 minutes. And Ilana, you've done a ton of television. You might be on for 3 minutes, but all that preparation culminates in those 3 minutes that you're actually on the air.
Exactly. And it lets you be natural and have a good time. I think once you've got facts in your back pocket and data at your fingertips, you'll have a ball wherever you are.
Be well supported. I think about the 5 people I'm surrounded with all the time. What does this do when it translates into mentorship?
I love that you said that because that was exactly Hoda Kotb's quote in the book. She said, surround yourself, with the 5 people, take stock of the 5 people around you, surround yourself with positive people. That was her point. But other people said it as well. Sudie Green, a writer from Saturday Night Live, in response to a question, how do you get a sketch on SNL, said, surround yourself with people who inspire you, people who are funny, and get creative with them. Amanda Hindlian from the Stock Exchange talked about surrounding yourself with people who would be supportive and brave. And I think taking real care to not your larger circle, obviously. I mean, we want to have a wide and robust circle, but the people who impact you every day, look around at a young age. Are these people supportive? Are they destructive? Do they make you feel emboldened? Do they make you feel vulnerable? I don't know that there's an age where it's too early to be aware of that.
And yesterday I interviewed Laura Gassner-Otting, and one of the pieces of tactical advice that she offered on this is we often think that these mentors, or we think that these 5 people that we surround ourselves with have to be in real life people, but they can actually be the folks that you have on your social feeds. And if you're getting daily notifications from them and they are forcing you to up level, that's another way to craft those 5 people that you surround yourself with. And it's a reinforcing mechanism.
Entirely. And it's a great way to use social media for good. In the book, we asked every woman who was in it to give her preferred social media handle. So where she is, whether that's LinkedIn or TikTok or Twitter, where she spends most of her time. And every one of them gave it knowing that girls might DM them. I have another question. I'd like to follow you. This is a tremendous opportunity to use social media to follow people who do that which you might want to do someday, or who have interests that align with yours, or work for a brand that you have an affinity for. So social media here is
one of my favorite, and another favorite way of mine to reach someone who's done epic things is to read their memoirs. I may never meet Bob Iger, who was the former CEO of Disney, but he gave me a front row seat on how he was able to merge George Lucas, Marvel, Pixar, and I forget what the 4th company was, to create Disney Plus. And you have a front row seat to how he negotiated each and every single one of those alliances. And so I feel like there's so much to learn from a mentor who may not necessarily be in person, but someone who's taken the time to put all of their learnings into a book.
Right. And the beauty of a memoir or something like that, a mentor on the page, is you can take your time with it. You can put notes in the margin. You can sit with that information and revisit it at your leisure. And that makes it all the more meaningful sometimes.
Be curious. I think a lot of people could benefit from this tip on many different fronts. But when it relates to mentorship, what are your thoughts?
Here, I think what it means is the pivot. What I found from a lot of the answers, and it couldn't have been more timely coming out of the pandemic, not just for the next generation looking at first jobs, but women onboarding back into new roles or who had stepped out during the pandemic and now are coming back in, perhaps taking a new path, is be curious enough to embrace the pivot. The what if. Dawn Porter talks about how she left the practice of law to go make movies with Oprah. Valerie Lomez actually ironically also left law to go and become a contest winning baker and has cookbooks out, and she is literally baking the life she wanted. The idea that women have left medicine to go into the military or vice versa, the idea that there is flexibility, that your career path is not necessarily a ladder anymore, doesn't go in a straight line. We've heard the phrase, it's a jungle gym, it zigzags. But being curious enough to say, what if maybe this is not the last thing I'm supposed to do or the thing that I was meant to do forever? So I think leaving space for the pivot when you're young or in the middle of your career, that kind of curiosity is really beneficial.
So if a woman has already been a lawyer or an architect and is seeking a mentor mid-career, how would that advice be different than the advice you would offer someone matriculating from college?
I don't know that it's different. I think you have more to stand on. You probably have more shared ground. You have more accomplishments to fall back on. You can draw more of a dotted line between this is what I was doing and I am fascinated by what you're doing. And here are all the reasons why I'd love to have a conversation. You're looking for a different type of mentorship. Maybe it's more inspirational. Maybe it's more of a springboard. You don't necessarily need a blueprint of how to conduct your career, but you need some direction. You need a little empowerment. I don't know that the tips are all that different. You're just at a different starting point.
Well, what if the imposter syndrome kicks in? Because I hear that over and over again. Oh, I don't know that I would want that person would want to speak to me. How do you kick the imposter syndrome though when you're mid-career and so many years of defense mechanisms have built up?
It's tough. I think the thing I would keep remembering is she's been there. Exactly what you're thinking. She has stood in those sneakers or shoes that you're standing in and has thought about the same thing, has weighed whether or not to raise her voice in that board meeting or that interview, debated whether to raise her hand or not. She's been there. We all have. And it's incredibly hard to imagine when you see someone like yourself on TV talking about current events, so polished and poised, but we have all been there. And at any stage of your career, whether you are eyeing your first internship or exiting a job you've had for decades, there's always going to be, I think, a little imposter syndrome. And the women you admire have all felt it.
What would be a sentence opener if you were to reach out to someone mid-career? I love scripts. What would you say is a good script for somebody right now who's thinking about making that career switch and doesn't even know how to draft that email to the person that's their moonshot mentor?
Oh, I love that moonshot mentor, by the way. It's a great question. I personally like offering something of value at the outset, an idea, an article perhaps they haven't seen, a link to something. I think offering something right off the bat shows that you identify with what they do and you're not just here to take. I think giving more than you take is always the way to go, but particularly in a first outreach. Michelle Gee talks about that in the book, the idea of offering something at the outset that could be valuable to someone else. I think that might be a way to start.
And the way to set up that value is to do a little bit of research to see what this person cares about. What are they posting about? What nonprofits are they allied with?
I think so. I think also seeing who else they might have mentored and being able to cheer them on. Everyone likes to see the people who they have inspired go on to do well and be recognized. And you're showing that you value the fact that they have mentored others. And you might not expect the same level of relationship with the two of you, but recognizing that they're in that space, I think, is important.
For folks who are just joining, I'm interviewing IIana Raia, who has written the Epic Mentor Guide. She has interviewed 180 boss women and asked them about their biggest takeaways when it comes to mentorship. Of those 180 people that you interviewed, who surprised you? Like, who gave you a piece of advice that you'd never considered before on mentorship?
Another great question. I liked some of the women who talked about how they were probably expected to do one thing and then they did something completely different. We got questions about Dylan's candy bar from some of the girls, and Dylan Lawrence said straight out, most people expected her to go into art or go into fashion, and she started a candy empire. Lisa Sugar, the founder of Pop Sugar, talked about her obsession with pop culture and how she turned that into a career. Women, I think, who solved problems they saw before them, whether it was flavored water instead of soda with Hint, or products where they found themselves to be the audience, the customer. I thought that was really interesting advice. Haben Girma, the first person to graduate Harvard Law School deaf and blind, was fascinating to me. And she spoke not only about her advocacy for people who are disabled, but in general, the challenges of going to law school under any circumstances. And I thought that she was really impactful and informative. And then there was some of the women, the way they answered questions with such specificity. We got a question from a high schooler in New Jersey asking about a patent. I have an idea for a product. I think it's a unique idea. How early is it to protect it with a patent, and how do I do that? And Audrey Sherman, who is 3M's 100 patent woman, she holds over, I think, 150 patents for 3M, didn't just say, well, stay true to yourself and follow your dreams. And she said, it's never too early if it's a good idea, and let me walk you through the patent process. So I liked the specificity that the women, with which the women answered the questions. And I liked a lot of the answers where they talked about everyone expected me to go left and I went right.
Yeah. I've listened to Michelle Obama speak twice, once at the Barclays Center and once in DC. And she said that Barack taught her the art of the swerve. She was very much a linear thinker, very much the box checker. And then he came into her life, and she often says that he was just the master of the swerve, and getting to whatever it is that he wanted was never a linear line.
I could see that in his career, and I can see how that would resonate with her. I think for the next generation, in a way, they're very good at that already. They are very good at the idea of jumping or pivoting. I find very few of the high school or college girls that I work with who anticipate having one career their whole life or staying with one firm. When I came out of law school, it never occurred to me I would practice law anywhere but my one firm. And I was there for a long time. I think in this day and age, seeing job options, a lot of these girls too recognize the fact that the job that they may have probably hasn't been invented yet. And we had women from the space station and women from NASA speak to that in the book, that what you need to develop are your skills, because the job that you're ultimately going to hold probably isn't here yet.
My colleague Connie Seal wrote a book about the fact that this next generation is crafting their own job description and creating their own jobs. So they're even emboldened to go one step further and saying, hey, I see that you need this. You haven't created it yet, but I'm the person to fill it.
Right. I think that's true. And I think how creative, and if we can just put the right role models in front of that generation at the right time, early, when they are not too scared, when that confidence gap isn't too wide, and have them say, yeah, you're going to solve problems that we don't even recognize yet, but here are some steps that are probably applicable in a lot of different industries, and here are some skills that you need to start developing now.
Amazing. IIana, I'm looking at the questions that are starting to come in. Deepthi Mittal has one of the top performing real estate teams here in New York City. And I know that she is staunchly in the top 25, but she wants to get to number 1. So when somebody like that is in a very competitive industry, we know that real estate is very competitive in New York City. The market is crazy. How would you recommend somebody like that get a mentor?
I think it works both ways, because I think that someone like that can easily ask a mentor for 5 things that she knows she wants to learn or develop, and then can offer herself out as a mentor as well. There's all kind of reverse mentorship and peer mentorship, and she's got so much value to give as well. But I think in terms of finding a mentor to get her from the 20s to number 1, I would, again, get specific with what you want to know, and I would not rest until that question is answered. And if the first 5 people you approach can't give you the answer, ask them, who else would you suggest I connect with? I'm really keen on this particular skill or this particular piece of information. I love what you gave me. Could you recommend someone else I could speak with as well? Keep leveraging up in terms of those mentors. I think everyone wants to highlight their friends, highlight other people that they've learned from. And I would just be relentless until you get the answers you want.
But what if Deepthi approaches someone and they're immediately on their back haunches because they really clawed their way to number one and they're not willing to give up the goods? So just for someone who's maybe trying this out for size for the first time, how do you not get stymied by that?
I suppose there are some people who are just not inclined to be good mentors. They're not going to be sharers of information. They're not going to make room on their platform. I find that disappointing in almost every industry. And I find it rare among women. I will say with 180 asks, I sent, 5 emails a day for a very long time. And very few people said no. And the ones that did say no said, I'm just not the person to answer that, but let me give you to the woman who is. I know exactly who you need to speak with. So I think that's rare among women, particularly women as they get more senior. I think sometimes you have to cut the loss, but I would just keep asking and I wouldn't make it artificial. If there's no authenticity in the relationship, if it's not going to develop organically and you feel that that person truly is not interested in helping you further your career or springboarding you from one place to another, move on.
Mary Glover is also on the line. Mary, I'd love for you to put a question in the chat. Deepthi, if you have additional questions, you have carte blanche access to IIana. IIana, I'm going to go back to some of the basics here since we've covered off on your interviews, but why does mentorship matter? I imagine that mentorship, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago when women were just entering the workforce is very different than today when women are in the C-suite now. Not many, but they're in there. So what would you say is different about mentorship today?
I think mentorship is being proven across the board to help the bottom line, not just from the ground up and making sure that junior associates at a place have people to look to, but Harvard Business Review says that 84% of CEOs say that mentors help them avoid costly mistakes when they were coming up. And 90% of people who are mentored are likely to mentor other people. So if you have something that is good for your company and fairly self-sustaining, or if it's done well, it's going to continue as a corporate culture, I think companies are smart to instill formal mentorship programs in their businesses. It's good for their business, it's good for their people, and it keeps them there. I think senior people find it rewarding to give back. I found that again and again with the book, how much people love to mentor. They were thrilled to answer. And then they hoped that the relationship would continue, that girls would continue to ask questions. And I think it's important to know what you don't know. And then not just say, I will wait for that information to come to me in some organic fashion. I'm going to go out and find answers. And whether that means if you've been assigned a mentor and it's not the right person to add somebody else, or if you're young to say, I'm just going to create my own informal board of directors. I'm just going to find 5 or 6 people. They don't have to be women, but 5 or 6 people who I think would help guide my career. Taking some ownership of your career through mentorship is always beneficial. But the added bonus now is that companies are realizing how valuable it is.
I once interviewed Michelle Cordero Grant, who's the founder of Lively, the lingerie company. And when she first started her company, she made a list of all of her fears. And then she put a name next to it. And then she made it her business to make that person her best friend so that when customer service or some technical aspect of her business would break down at 3 a.m., that person was someone that she could call when things were going awry. And so I wonder what you thought about that, because that then moves into a space of more than just a professional relationship. That actually becomes a little more.
I think so. And I like the idea of pairing it with a fear. I think that is taking strong control over what you're nervous about and then who the right person is to help you. And again, recognizing that you can't solve every problem on your own. I think there's some value in recognizing that mentors aren't necessarily cheerleaders and they're not always going to just solve your problem and that's it. Mentors are there to challenge your assumptions, to defy your expectations, to push you into harder territory. Sometimes it's hard for us to get out of our own comfort zone, and we like to be surrounded by people who are saying, oh, great job just as you are, don't change a thing. But a good mentor is someone who not only you can reach out to for the scary stuff to help with the pain points, but who will then push you to solve your own problems and teach you to be the name next to that
Of course,
fear at the end of the day.
they're pushing the onus back on you to not rob you of those critical problem solving skills. IIana, I'm going to ask everybody who's listening in right now, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat and I will ask that to IIana. IIana, the next question is how to find a mentor. This morning, I had a woman on one of my mastermind calls. She's gone from being an architect to being in the apparel space, and she is upcycling saris that have been worn before into modern day fashions. And she really needs to figure out a way to sell better. She's got a revenue number she wants to hit. How does she sell better? If she wants to find a mentor that's going to help with her salesmanship, how would you say that she start that process?
She's in a very unique space. So I think that she may have to broaden. I love the idea of her company, by the way. I want that name from you. I think that's a very unique space. A lot of the time for me, a starting point, it sounds silly, but something like LinkedIn. I think the way that you can slice and dice the information on LinkedIn, who's a founder, where have they started, who they're connected to, who might have mentored them in the past, things that they've written. It's such a rich source of information that going there first and seeing where you have overlap in your circle, it's such an easy thing to say to someone, would you mind introducing me to this person? And if that's ever asked of me, if I can't do it, I will say right away, I don't have that kind of relationship. But where I can, I will always, always extend that introduction. And that's an easy way to sort it by industry, by company name, by length of time in their position. So she could always start there. But again, with the very singular sector where she is, it might have to be word of mouth. And it might have to be something as simple as 5 cold emails a day. And asking her network who they might recommend. People are answering their own emails more and more. I found this during COVID, again, with reaching out for the book. People were answering their own DMs. They were responding on their own much more than they would have had they been traveling everywhere and were in the office every day. It's not a bad time for the cold email.
Mary Glover asks, she wants to hear more about authentic approaches proposing brand alliances. She heard me talk about Bob Iger and how he brokered the merger with Pixar, George Lucas's company, and Marvel. Any thoughts on how to be more authentic when you're looking to do a strategic alliance like that?
I think certainly on the corporate side, when the brands make sense, when there's synergy, you're more than halfway there. And so the numbers always have to make sense. Matching corporate culture is a tricky thing, but it is a personality thing. And at the end of the day, figuring out how values can dovetail together, those are personal conversations. And to me, the more authentic those can be, the more in person, the more deep and mission driven they can be. And I feel like I'm using a lot of cliches, but I mean it. That organic relationship will help companies decide whether they can live together, whether they need to separate later. Relationships for corporate entities are in a few ways not unlike personal relationships, and done in person, done with specificity. I think that's a good way to start when the brands have enough synergy to actually be together and side by side.
Yeah. And Mary, I think if I'm hearing you right, IIana, one of the things that's often worth doing this exercise is figuring out what your values even are, or what are your company's values. I have a mastermind, and one of the first exercises that I have women do when they first come into the mastermind process is to figure out how they're hardwired, and their values are a big piece of it, because that becomes the North Star. Whether you're going to find a partner, you're going to hire someone, whether you're going to, do anything in this world, it's important to know like how you're hardwired, and your values are a big piece of that.
And knowing when you are well matched with someone else. If you have a good sense of your values, and it's well said, how you just put it, knowing when someone else has complementary skills, or where a business has complementary assets, are you going to fit together like a puzzle in a way that's going to last? And, I had the founders of Serena and Lilly, or the founder of the laundress, they talked about finding their co-founder and how that worked, and when it might be time to, they didn't say separate from, but graduate from that partnership. And recognizing when that is in large part, as you said, knowing what your mission is and how you are hardwired, and then seeing where somebody else's complementary skills will fit with yours.
Yeah. Mary, just to revisit the brand alliance that Disney struck up with Pixar, Bob Iger looked at the treasure trove of things that Disney had created, but that was in the 70s. And now kids were more enamored with the 3D high definition graphics that Pixar was creating. And he saw how very quickly Disney was going to fall out of the marketplace in terms of relevancy. So it behooved him to get into bed with Pixar. But who is the person pulling the marionette strings with Pixar? It was Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs was notoriously a very hard person to negotiate with. And he was also at that point diagnosed with cancer. And that was looming over him. Who was going to take over his company? So, knowing all of that, I think that it took many, many, many visits before Bob Iger was able to get Steve Jobs to agree to this alliance. But there were a lot of things and a lot of roadblocks that he put up before that was possible. But for him, it was seeing that his technology, his animations were quickly going to fall out of favor in the market, and Pixar was going to be the next wave to keep Disney relevant. Just, I don't know if that answers your question. The next question I have here, IIana, is how to conduct a successful mentorship alliance. I think there's probably a lot of wrong ways to get a mentor, but I'd like to talk about the right ways to do it.
Well, we've talked about the ask. We've talked about being specific and being fearless. I think being respectful is high on that list. Being respectful of the other person's time, saying, could we meet for 2 hours or could we have dinner, is just never going to work at the outset. The person you want to speak with is senior and experienced and expert and busy. So starting off with a light ask, would you mind if I emailed you 2 questions? Could I have 10 minutes of your time on the phone? Something that is a light ask and giving lots of room to say, if not this week, then next. Or if you've spoken with someone and you'd like to continue the relationship, could I check back with you in 6 months and email you another question? Making the ask light and respectful, I think, is a very good first step forward.
You suggested to Deepthi that she could be a mentor. So if you're going to flip the switch here and talk about how to be a good mentor, what would you recommend there?
Well, for something like Être, we actually have a form on the website where you can fill it out and say, I have expertise in this and I would love to mentor occasionally on Zoom or however it works for you. Within your own company, if there is a mentorship program, throwing your name in the hat early, I think is terrific. If you're a junior person, don't assume that you have nothing to teach somebody. There's so much, whether it's tech or social media or what's new in the industry. Use your Pixar example, that you might want to be able to teach people who are senior to you. And then certainly if you're senior, giving back in your organization is vital. So putting your hat in the ring within your company is terrific. And then locally, there are clubs. You could guest lecture at a university. You can write a piece talking about mentorship lessons you've learned and then inviting people to comment or speak with you. You can put up hours on a website and give free mentorship. There are so many ways to give back in an industry you love. And most industries these days, now that we're getting back to conferences and summits, have opportunity for breakout sessions and mentor moments and things like that. I think get creative with the different ways that you could mentor someone else. And if you've got a particular likeness, if you would love to mentor people from your school or in your community or in an underserved community that you would like to really reach in and make an impact, just do it, because there's no ceiling at this point to the height where you can take somebody.
Last question. What is a big not to do when you are seeking a mentor?
I think the entitled ask is a bad idea. The very general, can I pick your brain? The very large, could we meet for dinner? Would you be my mentor for life? These giant vague asks are just not only inappropriate, they're going to push someone back because you don't recognize their calendar and what they can give, and you don't know yet how useful they will be to you. So it shows a little bit of entitlement to give the big ask like that. I think also pursuing someone if they say they are not the right person. If someone gracefully and respectfully says, I don't have the bandwidth, I don't have the time, I don't believe I'm the right person for you, If you've asked them to suggest someone else, terrific, move on, but don't pester. Respect what they are saying and then find the right mentor, because the relationship needs to feel right from the start and boundaries need to be respected from the very beginning. So don't over ask and then don't persist if you feel like it's not going to be the right person.
IIana, this has been great. If anyone wants to work with you, if anyone wants to get your book, they want to engage with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Our website is etregirls.com. It's ETRE girls.com. We are at etregirls everywhere on social media. DM me. We have a million ways to get involved. And I just don't think there's anything better than encouraging people to raise their hands and ask the questions so that no one's lowering their standards.
Amazing. And I will finish with the fact that, IIana, I have a mastermind for women that are at a critical inflection point. They have some certainty around a goal. Maybe it's mentorship, maybe it's a promotion, and they want to realize that in a year. They could sit in 3 years and hope for it to maybe come to fruition, or we can put a real plan around it. And so I'm now enrolling for that next cohort, which starts in October. And if anybody would like to get involved or be enrolled in that mastermind, you can always email me at joya@joyadas.com. I'm going to put that up there. I'm making these banners on the fly as I go. IIana, always great to meet with you. I remember seeing your first interview on a morning show, and you were as crisp as you were then. Thank you so much.
Well, you made it just as easy. I had a blast. Thank you.
Take care.